Hello, everyone, and welcome to From Compliance to Connection, where businesses must embrace email accessibility. My name is Jane Mystery. I'm the Director of Brand and Content Marketing here at Litmus, and I'll be your host for today's session. First, we have a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into the meat of today's virtual event. Behind the scenes, we have the wonderful Kat from the Litmus customer support team and the speakers and they'll be able to answer all of your accessibility-related questions. And through the magic of technology, this session is already pre-recorded, so you'll get a copy of the recording and slide deck after we air today. And at the end of the session, we have a bunch of downloadable goodies from our speakers and from Litmus, so keep you going on that accessibility journey too, so stick around for those. On to the agenda for today's session. You'll learn how to make the case to prioritize email accessibility, understand the difference between being ADA compliant and meeting the requirements for EAA, European Accessibility Act, and we'll provide you with some awesome resources and tools to help you navigate the path to compliance. But without further ado, I'm going to let our email accessibility experts introduce themselves.
Awesome. So hi, I'm Sarah Gallardo. I'm a lead email developer and email accessibility specialist here at Oracle Digital Experience Agency. My expertise in this area is supported by 2 accessibility certificates, the CPAC and the Trusted Tester. And when I'm not working on building accessible email systems for clients, I'm diving into research with Oracle's Accessibility Program Office to develop best practices for our industry. I share a lot of my findings on my blog, a11y.email, and I also contribute to the ODX blog as well. Hi, I'm Lauren Castady. I'm an Associate Creative Director at Oracle Digital Experience Agency. I lead a team of designers and copywriters and often partner with coders like Sarah in creating digital experiences. I'm passionate about accessible design, and you might have seen me and Sarah on the Litmus Live recently. And so today I'm excited to dive into this topic. Awesome. And Lauren, you know what else?
Yeah, what?
You and I worked on our first accessible design system together back
That's
in
right.
2018, I think. Yeah, I remember that being a complex system. So glad that that's really where our relationship started to get really strong. So,
Right.
Hey, we did it. We did it. Look at us now.
Did it?
So, while we're talking about experience, let's talk about this email that really irked us over the past, years. 5 years ago, we have now COVID lockdowns, and I remember this email flooding in our inboxes. Every company, they were outlining their plans to keep us and their employees safe. But it was a moment when brands had to pivot quickly, right? And so things were coming out really fast. Emails became like primary bridge between companies and their customers. Messages had to be timely and relevant and all above empathetic, right, Sarah? Absolutely. And I feel like as a marketer, I love seeing how it all fit together and how we collectively really kind of rose to the occasion. I'm sure I wasn't the only person pulling Black Friday hours in the middle of March. It was a lot. So I was really kind of eager to see what everyone else was doing. So I kind of just kept peeking around at other people's emails. But then I got this email, and we all remember this format, right? Like the letter from the CEO, reminding us that there's a still beating heart at the end of all these emails you're getting that, really cares about you and wants you to know that they're taking care of their store clerks and how you can still buy from them, right? And this one specifically also talked about how this national chain of stores was going to close for COVID safety, right? And so as I was reading this, right, and it's like tugging at your heartstrings and all this stuff and trying to make connections, but I like tried to select the text just to see, is this live text? And it was not. It's images. It is an entire email made out of images, just wild, from a national U.S. retailer. And just to kind of add some context here, right? So because this email was all images, users with low vision that use Zoom tools to kind of increase the font size of the text couldn't use that here. So they were kind of stuck with what they had. And users like my daughter, who uses a browser extension to change text on any page to a dyslexia-friendly font, couldn't do that either. So this was completely inaccessible to them.
Oh, and the alt text was the kicker too.
Oh my
What was
gosh.
that?
Like, it's kind of embarrassing, honestly. So the text literally was shopcompanyname.com. So screen reader users, that's all they got. They didn't get the store closings. They didn't get the heart-to-heart with the CEO. Just none of that. To make matters worse, the link just went to the store website. It didn't go to like a page where they could get this content in a different format. And I think probably the silliest thing is that this email was not responsive. So these big letter images just scaled down, so barely anyone on a mobile device was going to be able to read them and have that experience. So just wild.
Yeah. And I know as, an email marketer, we pride ourselves in that one-to-one communication situation,
Yes.
right? But this was like 1 to 0.0.0000.
So bad. Right. And
Yeah.
it's not just about the legal access issues either, right? Like this company, this retailer lost out on sales because they weren't they were selling to people who literally couldn't access the content in this email. So that means that some other company got, those comfy loungewear robes we were all wearing and the bread making machines,
The
the
bread
toilet
maker.
paper. Yes, right?
Yeah.
We were all doing sourdough. And really, like, I think it's important that all those numbers add up, right? So Americans with disabilities collectively have $21 billion per year in disposable income after taxes and necessities. It's so huge.
Not a small number, right? No. And we'll talk more about this in a minute, but we're not just making something accessible so we feel good about ourselves, like, oh, we did it. We're really focusing in here on making something accessible because users with disabilities are spending their money but not with the companies like this if your emails are not accessible. So you'll definitely see a difference. So let's jump in and make a case for accessibility. And I think that we should start by aligning our definition a little.
Absolutely. So an email is accessible when its content and its functionality are usable by people with disabilities.
And so when people hear about email accessibility, they tend to jump straight to screen reader users, for example, but that's not really accurate, right?
Right. So disabled users include a wide variety of different people, from color blindness to ADHD to cognitive and physical disabilities. Disabled users are far from being just screen reader users. It's a lot of different people.
Right. Yeah. And we can even consider folks with temporary disabilities, could be a broken arm, like situational challenges, like bright sunlight.
Absolutely. Uh, and so when we say all users, we really do mean all users, right? And this isn't just about alt text or color contrast. It's really digging into the details of what makes our emails usable for everyone. All right, so let's clarify some terms because inclusivity and accessibility are often used interchangeably, but they aren't exactly the same thing. So when we talk about accessibility, we're really specifically referring to people with disabilities, which is a federally protected group of people with unique needs to access digital content. And so when we're creating accessible digital content, that means that we are focusing on the technical and design elements of our campaign to ensure that individuals with disabilities can actually access that same content and functionality, right?
Right. Yeah. And when we take a step back and you look at this graphic, right, we see that inclusive design and development. And so this approach includes people with disabilities, but also consider folks with different cultural backgrounds, marginalized groups who may face unique challenges with our content. So this could mean using mindful
slang words or avoiding them, or just being mindful with your word choices. Being careful on, what a color might mean, or even details that might not be obvious to everyone, right? So the goal is to ensure that words, designs, and content don't unintentionally exclude anyone, especially those with disabilities. So, and then when you zoom out even further, you see that the circle with universal design. And so instead of making adjustments as we go, this approach aims to create experiences that work for everyone, from the very start. So that means thinking about users of all abilities, ages, backgrounds, and experiences. By keeping these principles in mind, we move closer to building more accessible, inclusive, and welcoming experience overall.
You can't talk about accessibility without talking about disability, right? And it's crucial to recognize that this isn't like a small niche group. 1 in 4 adults in the US and the EU live with some kind of disability. And globally, that number is about 1 in 6, kind of depending on how it's measured a little differently. But as I mentioned earlier, disability is an incredibly diverse experience. My daughter used to say, if you know one person with dyslexia, you know one person with dyslexia. Right. And I think that so perfectly sums up the fact that there isn't one single universal experience of disability. So often, someone with a disability might have multiple conditions that would impact their daily life. So when we think about people with disabilities, I think it's really important to not automatically picture any one experience or one person.
You're right. And these numbers can get a little tricky because in email, our entire existence is based on numbers, even though it keeps getting taken away by Apple. Okay, so we've determined, the success of our campaigns based on how many clicks we get. We determine what email clients to determine rendering on based our usage statistics. And so, but we can't base our implementation on accessible best practices on a number of users that need those adjustments. So even one disabled user having a problem with our email can cause your email to be inaccessible.
Right. And while meeting these expectations may seem like extra challenging, failing to address them increases the legal risk for the brands that we work with. But Lauren, why does this even matter from a business perspective?
Yes. Let's dig into the why. So we already talked about how users with disabilities have a combined annual disposable income of 21 billion. And that's just the beginning. So in 2021, during the holiday season, Forbes found that retailers lost a staggering 828 million. Can you imagine? To inaccessible websites. That's e-commerce, baby. And so, Sarah,
plainly put, inaccessible content is costing brands money. Like it's not even a question. So by making content accessible, you're not just meeting compliance standards. You're broadening your audience and increasing engagement opportunities.
Yeah, I like to think about it as like accessibility, those opportunity, and expanded market. It's just, doing a couple little quick fixes, you're automatically reaching more people. But that's not all. When users can depend on your content being accessible, they don't just engage, they return. You're telling them, hey, this space is for you. So in email marketing, we talk a lot about one-to-one personalization, right? But true one-to-one communication is impossible if users can't access your content. So just as we pointed out in the COVID email sample, accessibility signals genuine commitment to every customer, making them feel valued and understood. This fosters that brand loyalty.
Lastly, beyond lost revenue and brand trust, there's another major factor here, and that's legal risk. So in 2023, there were over 4,300 accessibility lawsuits, and 82% of those impacted the e-commerce industry. So this isn't a small thing at all. And ignoring accessibility isn't just a bad user experience, it's a legal liability. So marketers really need to pay attention because compliant isn't optional, it's essential.
Yeah. And this, accessible content increases that revenue, right? So just as a summary, we build lasting customer relationships by building up that loyalty, and we protect our business from legal risk.
So let's take a minute to talk about the current legal landscape, right? So the EU is about to start enforcing its new accessibility law, the EAA. And this law will join other civil rights laws like the ADA, the ACA, the ADDA. There's a lot of them, which protect people with disabilities from discrimination, which is essentially what we're doing when we don't make our content accessible. So what's interesting when you dive into these laws is that they don't always give direct step-by-step instructions.
Oh, so you mean they don't say, hey, write good alt text?
Exactly. Right. So these laws tend to rely on external guidelines that are widely accepted. And in the digital world, the main set of guidelines that we use is the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guideline. And some laws, like in the US, have extra guidelines for specific use cases, like Section 508, which outlines rules for digital content related to the federal government. But even that leans heavily on the WCAG, like they share a lot of the same guidelines. So the general rule is if you follow the WCAG, you're actually meeting the requirements of these laws. And another important point is that the EAA specifically calls out communications that need to be accessible. And this is a really big deal because the ADA doesn't do this in the same way. And so some marketers have kind of been able to take advantage of that, thinking that they could avoid lawsuits. But I honestly think, just like the GDPR raised the bar on privacy, I think we're going to see that the EAA will do the same thing for accessibility.
Yeah. And honestly, it's just easier to meet the higher standard, right? From the start. And so we don't have to worry about where our emails are going or if they might cross that border, cross the lake. Wait, no, it's cross the pond.
Across the
That's
pond.
Cross the pond. Right. And so it's lake is so Midwestern and
You're so
that's where I am. So
cross that.
Sorry. And so I think it's likely we'll see even more focus on accessibility in email marketing to a result of the changes in the EAA. And I think it would be good. This is a good transition to do a quick overview of the difference between the two. So the ADA and the new EAA. And you guys, this is a tongue twister, so I apologize before I even start. But the consequences in the US. So the ADA is primarily enforced through lawsuits. And then when accessibility issues arise with the business, while government related issues are addressed through formal complaints. So this means companies often face legal action and settlements as a result of non-compliance. And then the EAA in the EU is enforced through a combination of fines and complaints. So with financial penalties serving as a key deterrent for non-compliance.
Right. And there's also differences in who it applies to. So in the US, every business and everyone connected to our federal government must follow the ADA. And as private citizens, we also have some specific requirements. So I know in Colorado and Denver, if I don't shovel out my curb cut, I could face a fine that way. So there's really a pretty overarching theme here. In the EU, they allow for some kind of different exemptions. So there are some primary schools and specific sizes of small businesses.
Yeah. And what is included, it also, like you were mentioning, is a bit different. So the ADA covers essentially everything. available to the public, whereas the EAA is focused on products and services.
Right. And the governance is different too. So I find this really interesting. So in the US, the only way to enforce conformance is through lawsuits, which is why there are so many lawsuits, right? In the EU, they're actually making it so that each nation state will have its own governance board to review products and services that are coming into the country. So it's kind of a different way to manage these things. And like I said, I'm really kind of curious to see how that's going to work out. And remember, despite these differences, the focus for us marketers is the WCAG, which will help us abide by these laws and avoid issues. And also have a quick tip. So here's a quick tip for those of you just getting started. Accessibility isn't just up to the email builder or the agency. It really is the brand's responsibility. And because the brand is the one that's accountable, they really need to make sure that accessibility is done right, meeting both the ethical standards and the legal requirements.
Yeah, and that's why having a clear strategy is essential. And so I think now it's time to explore a little bit how we can navigate, the path to compliance. And to help jumpstart your accessible marketing campaigns, we're going to talk about content and design creation and the development of your campaigns. So jumping right into, accessible content. When creating this content, it's crucial to consider how we communicate with our customers. Given their diverse backgrounds, we should use clear, simple language, state the purpose up front, avoid vague phrases, and keep content concise. At Oracle, we've seen examples like the ones here. At a first glance, sometimes the original message might seem fine, but as you go into refining it, it can make a really big difference in clarity and usability. So the ineffective example marked with a thumbs down and the red text is, vague. It's missing key details. Phrases like act now don't tell the customer what the deal actually is. And click here isn't helpful for screen readers, but it's also not clear and direct, stating that, overall, we're not seeing the discount, the deadline. We're not using descriptive links. And so we make content more accessible and easier to understand and be more effective. You could see on the right is the improved example, which clearly states the discount, highlights the deadline, and uses a descriptive link that tells users exactly where they are going. And not only is that more inclusive for all users, but it also increases clarity and effectiveness in guiding the customer to take action.
That's great.
And so, yeah, but I feel like while accessible storytelling is a little bit more subjective, like the CTA accessibility is more straightforward, and this section really covers the best practices that should apply to any campaign right away. And so first, let's talk about descriptive links. Instead of vague phrases like click here, we should tie the CTA directly to the content. For example, if we're featuring a catalog, a better CTA would be view our catalog. This approach helps our users, including those with screen readers, understand where the link will take them. And so moving down, the next is color contrast. The number one rule is that the text should meet WCAG contrast ratios to ensure readability. As a designer, I'm often surprised what doesn't pass the color contrast checks.
It's pretty strict. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've had to say white on yellow is a no-go. And I it's so pretty sometimes, something that's pretty just won't pass. Black and red is very popular. I see that all the time. And also just shades of blue. They're just a little light. They're too light to have that white text sometimes. And so that's why it's always good to use that contrast checker to make sure your final designs meet accessibility standards. That's one of the main things as a designer I'm always checking. And then color of reliance. And so when designing an email template, it's so tempting to just keep things simple, right? We like using the same color for headlines and CTA sometimes, but there's no identifier if there's something not like underlined text or an arrow next to it. So users who are colorblind may struggle to see that difference. So it's really important to have an identifier within a text CTA.
Yeah, totally. We also want to make sure that the entire CTA is clickable. So we really want wherever anyone clicks on that CTA to be able to activate that link. And we want to do that without using BML. So we're going to use like a padding or border style button to really kind of flesh out that entire space.
Another hot topic is alt text. And Sarah, I know you'll agree that there are so many ways we could approach this in email. Today, we're just going to scratch the surface with a few key areas. And one of the most common issues we see in email is text embedded within an image. And a great example is this classic app download CTA button. How often we see these images are given a vague and unhelpful description, like App Store. A better approach to this is to add more context, like it definitely helps by showcasing what the text actually says. So in this example, you could say, download the brand app at the Apple App Store. Say that 10 times. Apple App Store. So we I've included, visual text here. We're leaving a space holder for that brand name, but this way users get a full context rather than just like a generic label, And additionally, if the same text appears somewhere in the email, sometimes we can skip that redundant alt text to keep things a little bit more concise. Next is decorative versus informative images. And this is when we can determine if an image is decorative. So I like to ask myself, hey, Lauren, what value is this image bringing to my message? And so if it turns out that it's more of a decorative graphic that we can feature, say that's an icon or just a decorative photograph, that we can have an empty alt attribute. And so images that include like a logo or maybe it's an offer text or, highlighting a product that can feature more detail that's not included within the context of the email. We can get more of a sample similar to what's on the screen. And Sarah, I know a lot of times that linked images and functional images, we often have to work with our designers and content creators on this one.
I mean, in email, we love to link our images, right? Like it's a thing we do. But I think it's important to understand that the second we wrap a link around this image, you're fundamentally changing the alt text requirements. Because now you have to have alt text. A lot of people don't know this, but when you don't have alt text on a linked image, a screen reader user will actually have to listen to the entire link URL. So it's really a horrible experience, a really bad deal. So we have to have alt text there. And then we want to also explain where that link is going to take someone. And if you already have an informative image, that's pretty easy. You can just kind of, like our example here, add a shock now. In that case, when you're getting that entire context, it makes sense. But you really just kind of have to pay attention to where that link is going. A lot of people don't know that screen reader users will commonly navigate through content by jumping from link to link. And so if they're just landing on a link and they're not getting any information about it, they're not going to activate it, right? Why would they? So really kind of giving that additional context is super important. And then that kind of leads us into some of the coding changes we can make. And so the best thing we can do as email creators is to use semantic HTML, which basically just means that we're using the right HTML element for the content inside that element, right? So if we are adding a headline, that should be in a heading tag. If it's a block of text, we need to use the paragraph tag. And I've seen this in a lot of my audits that clients will just have, paragraphs of text separated by line breaks instead of having separate paragraph tags. Or they'll kind of stuff them inside divs or table cells. But we really want to make sure that if we're writing a paragraph, that is in a paragraph tag. And then because we are using tables for layout, we also want to kind of declare that we're using them for layout. And so the way we do that is to add a role presentation or role none to each of the tables in our email, which you also shouldn't have a lot of. So we want to make sure that we're reducing the number of tables because that really can clunk up the experience for screen reader users. It's like genuinely awful. So we want to build with the least amount of table cells possible. So we also need to think about how people are using assistive technology to interact with our emails and really kind of plan ahead for that. I like to call this kind of flexible design where we're really thinking about how a user is going to use that email. So for example, people with low vision or older users can again use a zoom setting or change the settings on their phone to increase the size of the text. So it's important that when we are building these out, that we're really thinking about that and double checking to make sure that our text isn't getting cut off on background images, that all of the text is reflowing well. And this is also why we don't want to control text flow with line breaks, because if that text gets twice as big, those line breaks are going to look really sloppy. But that's not the only way that people interact with our content. I kind of shared this a little bit earlier, but my oldest uses a browser extension that changes the text on a page to a dyslexia-friendly font to make reading easier. So if our emails aren't set up to allow for that, then that's going to create an inaccessible experience for those users. So to really support users with disabilities, we really need to plan for these kinds of adjustments and make sure that these users can have a smooth, positive experience navigating your emails.
Isn't it interesting to see that Apple email with that font? Just as like an outsider,
That's not
just
how
like
it's supposed to look.
what?
And apologies for anyone who might be from Apple here on this virtual event. And so that is not your original email. That is what it looks like with the actual.
It's what it looks like when my kid looks at what's
that email is not a brave,
which is great. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's really a good thing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. I know that, we could talk endlessly about accessibility techniques and, the key insights that we provided here are just a solid starting point. Like before we wrap up, though, we do have some tools and resources to share with you all.
So, right. At Oracle Digital Experience Agency, we actually put together a checklist for accessibility and inclusive design to help you create more accessible content. So it is chock full of 12 pages of tips to kind of help you think about how to make your content more accessible for all users. We've got a kind of link and QR code there for you. But yeah, and Lauren, tell us more about this audit.
Yeah, another service we offer at Oracle is we provide clients with an accessibility audit workshop. And so we compare current emails against accessibility standards. We identify areas of improvement and development, and we develop an action plan. And so I want to point out that you don't need to be on Oracle products in order to take advantage of this service. So don't be shy. On the screen, you'll see a QR code, and Sarah pulled together one of her latest blogs on the ODX site is about knowing when you're ready for an accessibility audit. Sometimes it's just a matter of like your template's been in play for over 5 years and you haven't looked at it. And so feel free to reach out to us via email or through our website. So we look forward to working with you.
I feel like I have to start this with and that's not all. But really, that is not all because like Litmus, we also have like a variety of features and tools and awesome things that can help you on the more technical side of making sure you're being compliant in terms of accessibility. There are some awesome visual impairment filters in Litmus to help you ensure there's enough color contrast in your email design. So this might be something you want to do at the email template level, so you've got your bases covered. Or even you can build it into your email design system, so you really have a solid baseline there when it comes to color contrast in your email design. And we all know email creation is complicated enough as it is, so the accessibility checks built into Litmus Builder and previews in QA help you get visibility into those checks without needing to actually dive into the code for yourself, because nobody's got time for that. And then finally, hearing what your email sounds like can be a bit of a revelation. It's not just helpful for folks who need to use screen readers, like you said, but also those who choose to use screen readers out of convenience. And the good news is all of these accessibility checks are available in every single Litmus plan. And there is a QR code on the screen right now, which you can use to find out a little bit more information about this. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope we've inspired you to take your first or maybe your next steps in the journey to accessibility compliance. You can follow our expert speakers, Sarah Gallardo and Lauren Castady, on LinkedIn. So the links are right there. Thank you both so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us today. It's always really fun to hear from passionate accessibility experts too. And then also popping up on your screen right now will be a few links to a pre-send accessibility checklist you can download. Use it every time before you hit send, and then pop over to the Litmus resource section for a variety of resources to help keep those learnings going. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having us.